Yeah, I'll start the class now. Okay. Today we will be discussing on basal ganglia and extrapyramidal system. Sorry, and these things. Okay. So you all know that in the descending fibers. So we have ascending fibers and descending fibers. The fibers which ascend are mainly concerned with the sensor system, and the fibers which descend down are mainly concerned with motor and autonomic nervous system. So these are the how it goes. In the descending fibers, the major components are divided into pyramidal and what? How many of you know pyramidal and extrapyramidal? So the descending fibers could be just put it as pyramidal and extra pyramidal. Okay, this is how the descending fibers are classified. So in the previous classes, I have covered about pyramidal system, and pyramidal system is basically a, if it is involved, pyramid system, if it is involved, it leads to paralysis. What is paralysis? It is a, can anybody tell me what is paralysis? Paralysis is a loss of power. Here there is a loss of power. But when it comes to extra pyramidal system, it is a bit different. It is not basically directly concerned with the power. In fact, it is concerned with the coordination or something like other parts of the power where you got initiation of the movement. Those things it is concerned with. So the disease which involve these extra pyramidal systems, they behave differently from the diseases which involve the pyramidal system. Now we'll discuss that now here. Now the major components of a pyramidal system is is this basal ganglia. Can anybody tell me what is basal ganglia? What are the components of basal ganglia? Students? So what are the components of basal ganglia? Diagram is here. Can you see the diagram? This is actually basal ganglia. It extends up till here. See, this whole thing is a basal ganglia, but in fact, it is not anatomically connected thing. So this area is basically concerned with basal ganglia, and some things, this is actually not a part of basal ganglia, amygdala. Some things here are excluded from basal ganglia. So the basal ganglia functions, they are interconnected. They are interconnected things. So these interconnected things are now clinically we are grouping them as basal ganglia. So what is this? What is this red one outside here? It is caudate nucleus. And I'll come to that. I'll show many diagrams so that you'll get a understanding about it. Now this is, there is, what is this? Actually, this whole thing, the red thing here, this is actually lentiform nucleus. It can be called as lentiform. Yeah, one more thing, important thing. What do you mean by this ganglia? Can anybody tell me what is ganglia? Students, tell me what is ganglia. What do you mean by ganglia? So ganglia is a collection of neurons actually, but when you use the term ganglia, is only in peripheral nervous system. Okay, but inside the central nervous system, any collection of neurons is not called as ganglia. It is basically a gray matter. Now here in the central nervous system, the gray matter or the collection of neurons is called as nucleus. Nucleus. Then if I ask you here at the periphery at the top, what do you have? Gray matter, Am I correct? At the top, on the surroundings of the brain, the external aspect of the cerebrum is actually gray matter, but we don't call that as nucleus. Why? So nucleus is only is for those people if this gray matter or the collection of neuron inside the central nervous system, if it is surrounded by white matter, then we can call them as nucleus. So basal ganglia is a misnomer. It should be called as basal ganglia nucleus actually. It is a because it is inside the central nervous system and it is a gray matter which is surrounded by white matter here inside, deep inside it is. So this should be properly called as nucleus. Anyway, people called it then, that is still continuing. So now this basal ganglia is a collection of many things. So it is one thing here, it is a caudate nucleus. Since caudate nucleus, it starts from here. This one completely. This red thing, this is all caudate nucleus. And this is like its tail. At the end of the caudate tail, you have got amygdala, which is actually a part of hippocampus. Now it is put in the hippocampus. It is not considered as a part of basal ganglia now. Amygdala. Forget about the amygdala now. We only think it is a part of hippocampus. And this one, whichever it is there, this one is actually lentiform nucleus. Collection. So lentiform nucleus has, it is structure now in coronal section. This is a sagittal section. This is sagittal section. I have got one more diagram where I'll show coronal section. In that, lentiform nucleus is something like this. It is a here lentiform nucleus has got outside putamen, inside it is globus pallidus. Globus pallidus. Again, this globus pallidus is further subdivided into globus pallidus interna, globus pallidus externa. Okay. Now, and this basal ganglia also involves this subthalamic nucleus. Subthalamic nucleus. And further, here this is the midbrain. In the midbrain, it includes substantia nigra. So, basal ganglia contains here. This is the coronal section of the brain where this one, red thing. How is that what are you sitting on that? Is actually what is this? Caudate nucleus. This is caudate nucleus. Caudate. Here they are named it here. See, this is caudate nucleus. This is the ventricle. Sorry. So this is thalamus. So this is a caudate nucleus, and this is what is this? So what is this? Putamen. This is this center part here actually is thalamus. This is thalamus. This is a caudate nucleus. This is a caudate nucleus. This caudate nucleus along with putamen is called striatum, or more appropriately neostriatum. It is called neostriatum. And this whole triangular thing, what you're seeing is called lentiform nucleus. Okay, this triangular thing inside, what is it? It's called lentiform nucleus. And this one is thalamus. There is even name now. It's not mentioned in this. This is actually thalamus. And these things are subthalamic nucleus because below the thalamus they are there. They're called as subthalamic nucleus. You can see that they are mentioned here. Now here in the midbrain, here you got anteriorly this substantia nigra. These all things you got to know. Substantia nigra is further subdivided anteriorly and also posteriorly. Is further divided. Substantia nigra compacta, substantia nigra reticulata. It is called. And the substantia nigra, these two have got a functional importance. Although these things appear very disconnected. Here, so you can see here, caudate nucleus is here, lentiform is here, and the substantia nigra is here, subthalamic nucleus is here. These things have got a functional relationship. So basal ganglion is functionally includes this many things here. Substantia nigra, lentiform nucleus. Lentiform nucleus is further subdivided into outside putamen. Inside it is called as globus pallidus. This globus pallidus is again subdivided into globus pallidus interna, globus pallidus externa. You got to know that. And this subthalamic nucleus is there. These are the components of globus pallidus. Let us learn some more terminology which we use. Corpus striatum. Can anybody tell you what is corpus striatum? See here, there is a corpus striatum, there is a neostriatum, there is a lentiform nucleus. Three things. Corpus striatum is caudate nucleus with lentiform nucleus. Whole thing. So corpus striatum is caudate. Sorry, this is caudate nucleus plus lentiform nucleus. That is corpus striatum. The neostriatum is caudate nucleus plus what? Putamen. You got to know them because these things are functionally they are there. The lentiform nucleus contains putamen plus what? Globus pallidus. This is further separated into interna and externa. So it is further separated into what? Interna and externa. Okay. So this much is clear to you people. You got any doubts here? You ask me, because next on so many things we'll start interpreting them and you'll get into confusion. Okay, I'll go to the next slide. Now we'll come to this direct pathway and indirect pathway. Have you heard of this direct pathway and indirect pathway? Now these all things, what this basal ganglia, all these things is basically it is a collection of programs now. So if you want to make a move now, if the body wants to make a move, the thought process comes where? The thought process comes inside the frontal cortex. Okay, the thought process comes in the frontal cortex. This frontal cortex will, what it will do? It will send a signal down to what? It says that I want to lift a cup of tea. That movement, whatever organized movement, whatever program, now you have to extend your limb, arm, pick that or tumbler and do that. That program is inside the what? The coordination part inside the what? Basal ganglia. Okay. So what it does is when this thought process comes, the signals comes to basal ganglia, and basal ganglia, what it does, it organizes the posture of the body, how the posture should be there. Now the body has to be erect position. The shoulder has to be, it should come, it should extend here, and whatever tones are required, how much how much the flexors should be, flexor should flex and extensor should relax. All these things are programmed inside the what is caudate nucleus. So prefrontal cortex, from their thought process, it comes to basal ganglia. Basal ganglia, it does this what sorts of mechanisms, I'll come to that. But direct pathway and indirect pathway, basically the direct pathway is agonist. For example, flexors of the elbow have to contract, means it will send the excitatory signals to the flexors, whereas indirect pathway is antagonist. So it will relax the extensors. So there is no fight between flexors and extensors. That's what is that signaling thing happens with the help of direct and this indirect pathway. This is basically antagonist muscles will work, whereas this is direct pathway will work on agonist muscles at the moment. So that's about agonist and antagonist. Now let us come to further parts of direct pathway. Here, this is cerebral cortex is there. From there, the thought process has given excitatory impulse to the striatum. Now they have put it as a striatum. This is actually, they mean neostriatum. That means they are calling it as caudate plus what? Putamen. The signals from the cerebral cortex that reach the what is this? Striatum. These are glutamate. So neurons which secrete are, they are glutamate. This is dopaminergic, of course. This is substantia nigra. This is dopaminergic. These are dopaminergic. So substantia nigra, that is in the where? Where is substantia nigra? It is in the mid brain. Okay, you should know that. So from the cerebral cortex, the excitatory impulse will reach the striatum. So this striatum will has got further it will give the signals to the globus pallidus internals. Here it is globus pallidus internal, but these are GABA. They are GABA based. These are glutamate. Glutamate. The glutamate means they are excitatory. GABA means they are inhibitory. So from the striatum, to the globus pallidus internal, they gives a inhibitory impulses. Now, along with that, from the midbrain, this substantia nigra pars compacta will also send dopaminergic fibers that are called as nigra. These are important, nigra striatal fibers, because they are involved in the Parkinsonism. Nigra striatal fibers. These secrete what? Dopamine in the striatum. They secrete from the nigra to striatum. They secrete dopamine here. For the purpose of direct pathway, there is a D1 receptor here. Okay, striatum has got both D1 and D2 receptors. But for the purpose of direct pathway, they have D1 receptors. These are receptors which are excitatory. Okay, so from the nigra and from the cerebral cortex, for the purpose of direct pathway, it is excitatory impulse. But striatum, what fibers it sends are GABA based. Okay, these GABA based fibers will inhibit, because they are GABA based, they are inhibitory. They will go and inhibit globus pallidus internal. Know this properly. Because they inhibit, these also give GABA based fibers to the thalamus, but the amount of inhibition is reduced. There is so usually globus pallidus internal would be giving inhibitory impulse to the there's less negative marking, you can call it as, because the inhibition has come. Because of the inhibition, there is less negative marking. There is a less negative marking. Okay, so because of less inhibition, this thalamus will be less inhibited. Less inhibited, so it will give more impulse. So it all means that a direct pathway will ultimately lead to what? Excitatory impulses coming from the thalamus. Okay, now this is good for agonist muscles. Okay, if the flexors are to flux, the impulse has to increase. So for the extensors of the elbow, now you expect what? Reverse inhibition should happen. This happens with indirect pathway. So in indirect pathway, you can see ultimate result is inhibition. Inhibition. How that happens? Let us see. So cerebral cortex will send excitatory impulses, but here the indirect pathway neurons will send signals to globus pallidus external. Just see that globus pallidus externals and striata nigral fibers here. For these neurons which contains D2 receptors. So although they behave as inhibitory, although striata nigral fibers do secrete dopamine only for both direct pathway and also for indirect pathway, because of the nature of the receptors in the striatum, the action is different. So they have a D2 receptors in the striatum. This will send inhibitor signals to the globus pallidus external. So from external, it sends less inhibition to subthalamic nucleus here. See, it is going to subthalamic nucleus now. This also further you should know that cerebral cortex will have excitatory impulses from subthalamic nucleus also. So So the amount of inhibition from the globus pallidus external to in the subthalamic nucleus is less. So what will happen if there is less inhibition? There is a more excitation here, which is passed on to the next visual excitatory. From there, this excitatory impulse will reach globus pallidus internal again, and from there you get a what? Inhibition to thalamus. From there, thalamus will send inhibition to the less amount of this is when they send globus internal extra impulse from here, it will reach the cortex, but here it is inhibitory. Inhibitory. So the extensor muscles will have to relax. Extensor muscles will have to relax here. Extensor muscles will have to relax here. So indirect pathway, what will happen? There is a inhibition to the cortex back. In direct pathway, it is excitatory. Excitatory here. Here, do you have any confusion in indirect pathway? Actually, now from here also extra from subthalamic there is a this pathway. This one, yeah, correct. This is okay. I'll just for it. I'll tell you what. From because there is a inhibition to the thalamus, the amount of excitatory impulses going to the cerebral cortex is less. Did you get my point here? Are you confused with indirect pathway? Because the amount of inhibition of thalamus has increased due to this path. From these impulses, the excitatory impulse going to the cerebral cortex will decrease. So the muscles will relax, thus helping the movement of agonist muscles. Here, any confusion, students?
No, sir.
Vandana?
No, sir. Understood,
Got
sir.
the point, na? Yeah. So in direct pathway, the internal will send what? There is a loss of inhibition here, because they'll get a loss of inhibition. Whereas in indirect pathway, there is a more inhibition going to the thalamus. Okay. Basically, globus pallidus inhibition internal will send there will be loss of inhibition in direct pathway, whereas in indirect pathway, globus pallidus internal will give more inhibition to the thalamus. So thus the impulses going to the cerebral cortex are decreased.
Sir, once again, sir, I'm a little bit confused.
Which one you want?
Sir, direct pathway.
Direct you want? Okay.
Sir. First here in this, sir, cerebral cortex, there is excitatory transmission will be there, sir.
Yeah.
From the central cortex to
striatum,
sir. Then from there to inhibitory to globus pallidus internal.
Okay, correct.
Then from there to thalamus, it is inhibitory or excitatory, sir?
Now, actually, by routinely globus pallidus internal, you'll be sending inhibitory only. These are GABA-based neurons. Okay.
Sir.
Globus pallidus internal, they are by default, they are GABA-based. Okay. When they are suppressed, they'll stop their inhibition. Okay.
Sir.
They are suppressed by these fibers. What?
Okay, sir. I got that. Thank
by
you.
default, globus pallidus interna, which give transmission to thalamus, are GABA based. GABA based are inhibitory by nature. GABA based neurons are inhibitory by nature because the amount of impulses going to the internal, global internal from the striatum are decreased. These are less stimulated. Okay.
Yes,
because the amount of impulse on the striatum to the globus pallidus internal are decreased, globus pallidus internal less stimulated. That means the amount of inhibition from this to this thalamus is less. Now
Yes.
thalamus will start bombarding.
Yes, sir.
So thus the fluxors will flux. But now here you see because the amount of impulse from subthalamus to the globus pallidus internal increased here via subthalamics. The globus pallidus internal will give more inhibitory impulses to the thalamus. So it suppresses the thalamus. Because it suppresses thalamus, the impulse going to the cortex are decreased here. So there is a exflexion. That means it will allow to extensor of the elbow or whatever the agonist muscles are there, they'll cooperate with the flexors. Let them do your work like that. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
I'll go to the
Yes,
next
sir.
slide.
Yes, sir.
So extrapyramidal tracts, unlike pyramidal tracts, these things origin in the brain stem. This is very important. Now you have got sensory tracts. Okay, sensory tracts now. So you can see there are many synaptic impulses going from the spinal cord. They'll go and nucleus gracchalis. From there, one more neuron will come. From thalamus, one more neuron will come. But these motor descending fibers, they are not like that. Once it starts, it goes down. So the corticospinal tracts, which are pyramidal tracts, which origin in the cortex, they all the way go down to the spinal cord and relay there. Then the lower motor neuron will start. Am I correct? So that's why we have got UMN and LMN lesions in what? Pyramidal tract. Pyramidal tracts. And similarly, the extramedullary tracts, see pyramidal tracts origin in cortex. So extrapyramidal tracts origin in the brain stem. I'm coming to what are those extrapyramidal tracts. Okay. Of course, they are modulated by our brain, basic ganglia and all that. But these tracts origin in brain stem. That much you should know. From the brain stem, from the cortex, these things get modulated because they have got these tracts are their origining is from the brainstem. You should know that. Corticospinal tract origin in the cortex, whereas extrapyramidal tracts origin in the brainstem. Okay, so these that's it. Now, so they are concerned with automatic control of all muscles, involuntary and automatic control of all the muscles. That automatic measurements. If you are running, how posture should be. If you are bending, if you are picking something, how posture should be. If you are into locomotion, how things should be arranged. Those things, actually the pyramidal tracts, which are in fact they get feedback from extrapyramidal tracts, from the basal ganglia, and from there the whole thing starts. The movement starts. So basically, it is the initiation here. So initiation of the movement happens here. So if these are having problem, actually power is preserved, but there is a bradykinesia, initiation of the movement. That is how the cardinal signs of Parkinsonism is coming here. Okay, because it involves a substantia nigra and basal ganglia. All things are involved. I'll come to that later. So the basically extrapyramidal tracts involvement leads to no problem with power. You should know that power weakness is not there. Whereas in pyramidal tract, you got the power problem. All that grading of power you do grade 1 by 5, grade 2 by 5, and all that. That is only for pyramidal tracts and not for extrapyramidal tracts. Okay, that's what. And so these things are involved in muscle tone, balance, posture, locomotion. Even cerebellum can be grouped in extrapyramidal systems. So it is also part of extrapyramidal system, because I want to take cerebellum separately because it has got some other things to do with. So I not concluded here. Now, so what are those extrapyramidal tracts? There are 4, namely vestibulospinal tracts, reticulospinal tracts, rubrospinal tracts, tectospinal tracts. And these two, they descend ipsilaterally, and these two they cross to the opposite side. You should know that. So all cortical, Which are there any corticospinal tracts which go down ipsilaterally? Around 95% will go, but some do come ipsilaterally. They are there. Interspinal tracts, they'll come ipsilaterally. Okay. Similarly, but here these two tracts go ipsilateral. What I mean by ipsilateral, contralateral? Can anybody tell me? I'm using those terms, and I'm really afraid you people should not get confused. What is ipsilateral and contralateral?
Ipsilateral means same side, sir.
Huh?
Same side.
Same side. Very good. Very good. Ipsilateral means they are going in the same side. That is vestibulospinal tracts and reticulospinal tracts. They descend on the same side. So it's whereas these two tracts, these two down, they go contralateral. They cross to the opposite side. Now let us discuss the one tract here, that is, what is this? Vestibulospinal tract. There are two types in that, medial and lateral. Both go down ipsilaterally only. They control the balance and posture. They are innervating anti-gravity muscles, flexors of the arm and extensors of the leg. These are anti-gravity muscles. In the arm, flexors are anti-gravity. In the leg, extensors are anti-gravity muscles. You should know that. They can ask you these questions. Some questions are moving around this. You should know these things. In the arm, flexors are anti-gravity, whereas in the lower limb, it is extensors of the anti-gravity muscles. And reticulospinal tract, these are the two types, medial and lateral, and these facilitate voluntary movements. Now see, one thing, medial reticulospinal tracts arise from the pons. Lateral reticulospinal tracts arise from the medulla. So medial arise from the pons, lateral arise from the medulla. Okay, and these pons origin medial ones, they facilitate movement, increase tone, whereas the medulla originating reticulospinal tracts, they reduce movement, decrease muscle tone. They have got the balancing picture. Reticulospinal. These are what I discussed now, they are ipsilateral extrapyramidal tracts. Let me go to contralateral extrapyramidal tracts. There are two more. That's are rubrospinal tracts. These originate in the red nucleus, that is in the midbrain. And these decussate means they go to the opposite side. Decussating means immediately they go to opposite side of the origin here, red nucleus, they go to opposite side here. And these are involved with the, doubtfully, probably they are involved with the hand movements. Fine control of the hand movement. And tectospinal tracts also origin of the midbrain, and they get input from optic nerves. So these tectospinal tracts are basically concerned with visual input and coordinated head movement. How? That's what basically these tectospinal tracts. They got optic nerves. This tectospinal will help the movement of the head along with that. How the head should be positioned with a visual impulse. They coordinate the head in relation to the visual symptom. This tectospinal tracts. So this what is the introduction of the anatomy of the neuroanatomy concerned one. Now let me go to the disease, that is Parkinson's disease. So this was described in the year 1817 by English physician, that is Parkinson, his name. The cardinal features are these: rest tremors, rigidity, bradykinesia. These are the cardinal features of Parkinson's disease. Of course, there are many more features or clinical symptoms and signs of Parkinson's disease. But Parkinson's disease, cardinal, or what was described by in the past was only these three. I'll come to all that. So, resting tremors, rigidity, and bradykinesia. Can anybody tell me the difference between spasticity and rigidity? Can anybody tell me the difference between spasticity and rigidity? Can anybody tell me the difference between spasticity? Sirisha, Swati, Pooja, Vandana. What is the difference between spasticity and rigidity? So this is the easy one. You should have been told the moment you get into your CNS case, first case which you present hemiplegia, they will tell you about spasticity. You might have not seen your rigidity patient. See, we tell that the muscle tone, okay, against resistance, passive movements against resistance. So Manjunath, this passive movement against resistance is see the passive movements against resistance. Now what happens is this is for any, if that's how you check the tone. So you get a resistance for passive movements even in case of rigidity as well as spasticity. So that is hypertonia. This hypertonia is further subdivided into what? Rigidity and spasticity. So hypertonia na, this is resistance to passive movement. RPM, no, resistance to passive movement is hypertonia. So otherwise, increased resistance to passive movement is hypertonia. Okay, this can be further grouped into spasticity. This is a type of hypertonia, and this is rigidity. And there is of course coagular rigidity further. Okay, this spasticity na, this happens with lesions of pyramidal tracts or UMN. Okay, here what we get is a clasp knife rigidity. Okay, that means when you start flexing the arm or whatever, initially there is a increased resistance, but when you make a move, this resistance gives away. Okay, gives away. So the resistance to the passive movement is only limited to the initial part of the movement. Then it is called as spasticity. If this resistance persists throughout the movement, then it is rigidity, which are signs of extrapyramidal disease. Okay, and if this passive, other also called as lead pipe. So that means if you try to bend a pipe, which you will get resistance throughout the movement. Otherwise, if you try to open your key bunch in your nail cutter, clasp knife, they'll tell in India we can call it as a nail cutter. There is a knife inside. How many of you have tried opening a beer bottle with that? So if you try to open now, initially that knife inside the nail cutter, nail cutter inside there is a knife. If you try to open, initially you feel the resistance, but suddenly when you may open little, it will open easily. That is spasticity. So if you try to bend a lead pipe, throughout the bending process there is a rigidity. That is extrapyramidal. So initial resistance is spasticity, that is pyramidal. So this is there here in Pakistan. This is rigidity, and if this superimposed on tremor, if rigidity is superimposed on tremors, we get cog wheel rigidity. Okay. Now what are other things? There is a mask face. There's hardly any expressions here. Decreased blinking. The eye blinking is less. Stooped posture. That is because of back rigidity. They'll get a stooped posture here. And flexed elbow and wrist. See, the hand tremors can be there. There's a flexion here. Okay. And tremors can be there even in legs. You can see some people walking like this, shaky movements. Slightly flexed hip and knee. Okay. These are the normal posture of, this is the clinical features of Parkinson's disease patient. Now let us go into more detail about the symptoms. Okay, I showed a coronal section. So this is a beautiful image from, I think see people already, I told you all this is striatum, lentiform nucleus. What is this? Subthalamic or substantia nigra. Probably I said substantia nigra it is. SNC means substantia nigra. This is substantia nigra. This is, what is this? Externa, interna, globus pallidus. Okay. Same thing they are shown here, see, coronal section of the basal ganglia. Okay. STN means subthalamic nucleus. SNC means substantia nigra compacta. C stands for striatum, and that is global, that is caudate plus putamen. Globus pallidus, that is internal part here. These two. Here, there is a section here inside. This is a CT image. This is a, sorry, gross anatomy. Now the clinical features of Parkinson's disease. I told you these are the cardinal. Now the basic pathology of a Parkinson's disease is degeneration of what fibers? What? Nigra, striatal fibers. So I showed you this nigra striatal fibers here, where I showed you this one. See, these are, this one is nigra striatal fibers in the indirect pathway, and in direct pathway these are nigra striatal fibers. Okay, they influence striatum. So for indirect pathway they are inhibitory because of the receptors in striatum, and for direct pathway they are excitatory because of the receptors in striatum. So the nigra striatal fibers which secrete dopamine inside where? Striatum. Striatum includes both what? Caudate and putamen. Okay, they secrete dopamine now. So if there is a degeneration of these fibers or decreased secretion of dopamine here in the striatum, then there is a manifestation of Parkinson's disease. Of course, there are many more fibers are involved apart from nigra striatal fibers. Many more fibers are involved. I'll come to that. Because of that, the clinical picture is different. The way the Parkinson's patients evolves over the years and decades behaves differently, and the treatment response also differs because of it is not only nigra striatal fibers dopamine issue. There are many more issues along with that. Because of that, the clinical picture of Parkinson's disease varies over years. Okay. Now, so the cardinal features, as I said, bradykinesia, rest tremors, rigidity, and of course postural instability. And micrographia means small handwriting, masked faces, reduced eye blinking, drooling, soft voice, dysphagia, freezing, suddenly they freeze. These are other features. Now these two are actually motor. These are all motor features. Of course, although this is they do have other, as I told, it is not only the issue of nigrostriatal fibers, other systems are also involved. Because of that, we get even non-motor problems. Non-motor problems. It is anosmia, that is loss of smell. Loss of smell. And what is this loss of smell nowadays? Is there any relation to COVID-19? Students?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, loss of smell is one of the common symptoms. Actually, some neurologists are thinking the patients who present with predominant loss of smell for COVID-19, there is a possibility they're thinking these patients may develop Parkinsonism in the later future. I don't know. That is a guess some of the neurologists were discussing. Of course, there is no valid scientific proof for that. That's what they think. Because I'll come why it is so. I'll tell you. There is some Brecht's staging is there. I'll tell you that. We'll come to know that. There is a loss of smell. There is a non-motor manifestation. There could be sensory manifestation, pain, mood disorders, depression, sleep disturbance can be there. Autonomic disturbances can orthostatic hypotension, gastrointestinal tract disturbances, these things, sexual dysfunction, and of course dementia can also happen in Parkinson's disease over long period of time. Okay. We'll go to the Next slide. Now, as I told you, the cardinal feature is what? Degeneration of, what is the structure? Can anybody tell me what is the structure? Is it cortex? It is cerebellum? Is it pons? It is midbrain, or it is medulla? Students,
Midbrain.
identify the structure, na? Hello?
Midbrain.
Good, very good, very good. Midbrain. You guessed it. It is correct. Actually, midbrain only. I'll be interested in midbrain in Pakistan disease only. And this midbrain, see, you can see here, is nicely stained. Niagara means dark color basically. It is dark in color here. Whereas in this patient, this is normal person. In this patient, there's hardly any staining here. You can see? Can you see that? So there's a degeneration like this, reduced pigmentation, right versus left, normal left, substantia nigra. Okay. So it will be like this. In a Parkinson's patient, it will be like this. And that happens because of accumulation of Levy bodies inside those cells of nigra striatal fibers. Levy bodies will produce that. These are Levy bodies, inclusions. Of course, there is one disease called Levy bodies dementia also, that I'll cover in the next class, because I'll be covering chorea, dementia and all that. In the next class, I'll cover that. Okay. So other non-dopaminergic neurons involved here, there are many more. These are cholinergic neurons. Cholinergic neurons, norepinephrine neurons, serotonin neurons, olfactory system. These are the anosmia because of this. Cerebral hemisphere, dementia because of this. Spinal cord, peripheral and autonomic nervous system, orthostatic hypotension. All these things happen in Parkinson's disease over the staging. That staging evolution is called Braak staging. Now, so Levy bodies involvement can spread in predictable fashion. So it may involve the upper brainstem first, then it can evolve up into the cerebral hemisphere. So the Parkinson's disease patient is somewhere in between, from upper brainstem, upper motor neuron, upper brainstem, that is substantia nigra, and here dementia. Okay, the classical Parkinson's is a mid part of the state evolution. So actually, Parkinson's disease start involving substantia nigra, that Levy bodies, and the spread up to cerebral hemisphere. So when they develop a cerebral hemisphere, patients will develop dementia. When they are in this stage, they develop only Parkinson's disease. So same thing. So this anosmia, rapid eye movement, all these things, they can proceed several years in Parkinson's, because it evolves. It's not only it involves substantia nigra. It can involve other structures. Because of that, the treatment also becomes difficult. Because when other structures are involved, the problem starts. Because our drugs today, which is levodopa, is basically dopaminergic, dopa based. It will increase the dopa in the striatum. That's what it does. But other places, other part of cholinergic drugs, cholinergic neurons, norepinephrine, serotonin neurons, these problems are not solved by this levodopa, which is a drug which we use for treating what? Parkinson's. Because other things are also involved. Now, the differential diagnosis of Parkinson's is this is a Parkinson's. It could be sporadic or genetic, dementia with the Levy bodies. Okay. Now, a typical Parkinson's can present like something called as multi-system atrophy is there. This multi-system atrophy, there is a Parkinsonism with cerebellar type. See, multi-system atrophy, it can have predominant Parkinson's disease with other features of orthostatic hypotension will be there actually. Autonomic dysfunction, basically Parkinson's disease with autonomic dysfunction causing orthostatic hypotension is multi-system atrophy, or cerebral disease with orthostatic hypotension is multisystem atrophy. So multisystem atrophy is the two types, cerebral type, Parkinson's type. So Parkinson's, what all you have? Rigidity is there, bradykinesia is there, and you have tremors. If you have orthostatic hypotension, that is which is a manifestation of autonomic nervous system, then we call it as MSA, multisystem atrophy. P stands for predominant Parkinsonism. And if you, in case, if you got a cerebral signs, which is a flaccidity, intentional tremors, ataxia, and with that orthostatic hypotension of autonomic nervous system, we call it as MSA-C, which stands for cerebellum. There can be one or two MCQ which can come along this tricky part. Just try to memorize that. And similarly, PSP, progressive supranuclear palsy, that can also have Parkinsonism, Richardson variant. These are all rare things. This is also rare. This is also the type of frontotemporal dementia. So you have to diagnose them. Sometimes they can cause confusion when you're trying to diagnose. And there are secondary causes for Parkinsonism. It could be drug induced, tumors, infection, vascular, normal pressure hydrocephalus, trauma, liver failure, toxins, carbon monoxide, manganese, MPTP, cyanide, hexane. All these are causes of secondary causes for Parkinsonism. And of course, they can be associated with Wilson's disease, Huntington's chorea. I'll discuss this Huntington's disease in the next class. Neurodegeneration with the brain iron accumulation. These things also can have features of Parkinsonism along with these diseases. So Parkinsonism, because it is a degenerative disease, if it involves the mid basal ganglia, the manifestations will be there. Okay. Now, features suggest of atypical or secondary cause of Parkinsonism. So here I just not discussed this only. So what is it? If the patient responds proper nicely to your lower levodopa drug, then it is Parkinsonism. And if it is not responding, check your diagnosis. And if this is the early age of onset, then probably it is not a Parkinsonism. It could be something else. Maybe one genetic induced, but look for other causes. Okay. And if there is a gaze palsy, vertical gaze palsy, that is called progressive supranuclear palsy. Usually, these patients will come with multiple falls. Okay. There can be some MCQs around that. Now, let us go to a little bit about levodopa. So, you people are getting my Parkinson's disease, or you are getting confused? You're getting confused, or you're understanding it? Students?
Yes, we understood, sir.
So, if you got anything doubts, you have to ask me now.
Okay.
Because
No
there are
doubt,
two
sir.
dot questions they'll ask in Parkinson's disease. That's why I'm asking you. Hold on a second. Okay. So the prime drug for treating Parkinsonism is levodopa. This is a dopamine. One thing, the dopamine, okay, the dopamine, if you give peripherally, it doesn't go into the brain because of blood-brain barrier. So to overcome that, this levodopa, which metabolizes to dopamine inside the brain, is given levodopa. So, but this levodopa, if it is given, it gets metabolized even in the peripheral nervous system, peripheral circulatory system. To prevent that, we give carbidopa. So, carbidopa, it prevents the peripheral metabolism of levodopa. Thus, it makes the levodopa to be available for what? It makes the levodopa to be made available for the central nervous system. Okay, peripheral degradation of levodopa is prevented by this carbidopa. So it goes to the brain and does its job. That's all. That is the carbidopa does. That's why levodopa with carbidopa combinations are available in the market. Are in the market. Hold on a second. I have got a call. Remember, 1 second. One second. Okay. Huh? Sorry for that. So you can see my slides, students. Are you able to see the slides? Yes, sir. Okay, good. Now, dopamine does not cross and progression of a non-dop. Okay, one thing. So dopamine will levodopa will prevent this dopamine induced problems. Okay, but as I told you, apart from that, there are other nerves also involved in the Parkinsonism, but they are not being treated with this levodopa. So a patient who is receiving levodopa on long term, when it gets severe disease, these manifestation, non-dopaminergic features, especially falling, dementia, can't be prevented. And as a further, when lot of negra striatal fibers are degenerated, we get into this trap off and on phenomena because of levodopa. Off means the levodopa actually has got a very short half-life. So you give one dose, give another dose, in between that, drug level in the brain can go down. During when there is a fall in the drug level, the patient can develop off phenomena. That is, he suddenly starts manifesting with bradykinesia, tremors, and all these features will appear. So if you give a drug, and there can be overshooting. Suddenly there is a peak plasma effect. During this time, the patient may develop dyskinesias. So if you give a drug, a small dose of drug, so there could be off phenomena. If you give a high dose of drug, there could be dyskinesia. So now to overcome that, long-acting preparations have come. But even then, there are lot many limitations. As the severity of the disease goes, increases, these features of and on phenomena in a patient of Parkinsonism can come up. Along with that, these non-dopaminergic features will also become troublesome for the patient. And this, in fact, this progression of non-dopaminergic features is a major cause for morbidity in these cases. Somehow we can manage this on and off phenomena by managing with a drug, but these non-dopaminergic features will become major issue in treating these patients. Okay. And apart from dopamine, levodopa, there are some low dopamine agonists. That means these will act on D1 and D2 receptors of striatum. So D1 is concerned with the direct pathway, D2 are concerned with the indirect pathway. Okay. So these receptors, they are agonists. So initially these drugs, bromocriptine, pergolide, carbamazepine, cabergoline were used, but they were associated with the cardiac valvular damage and pulmonary fibrosis. If you use it a long term, now they are using second generation drugs, pramipexole, rapinorole, and roticotin. What is it? Okay, these drugs are used, but these drugs are less efficacious than levodopa. In fact, they are used along with levodopa. Okay, and start this drug with along. Okay, same thing. And I want some. I told you about off phenomena just now. Patient who is on levodopa can develop off phenomena. During that, apomorphine, which is dopamine agonistic, can be given subcutaneously in that emergency. Off phenomena can become very severe emergency. Patient can freeze due to severe bradykinesia. Patient can freeze. He can't move at all. That can happen. During such a time, if we give apomorphine subcutaneously, he will be relieved of his freeze. Statue, you have played a statue game in your childhood. Same thing can happen with these patients. Okay, they can freeze. Of course, more often they'll freeze to a chair because they take chair position. Okay, and the side effects are also there with this. The side effects could be sudden uninterrupted episodes of sleeping. Sometimes if the patient is driving, he can go and sleep there. These are side effects of dopamine agonists. And MAOA-B inhibitors. These MAOA-B inhibitors can also be used for treating this Parkinson's disease. Okay, these are central dopamine. They in fact they block the dopamine metabolism in the central nervous system. Thus, they increase its availability. in the striatum. Okay, thus whatever dopamine is available there, that gets better used. Okay, that's it. And the drugs are selagelin and rasagiline. They may increase the okay. When you start this MAWA not A. It is, look at this B. Okay, MAWA B inhibitors. If they are used along with levodopa, you have to reduce the dose because they may cause what? Dyskinesia, because the availability of dopamine inside the striatum will increase, and thus they can cause on-like phenomena. Dyskinesia will start. It can cause. So you should reduce its dose if you're using this drug. And some sort of, there is a recent some sort of evidence that MPTP toxicity can be prevented with MAWA-B inhibitors. What is it? Is actually drug abusers, heroin drug abusers can develop MPTP toxicity. Anticholinergic drugs and amantadine. Okay, anticholinergic drugs and amantadine. These are the history. We used to use it about 10-15 years. Now hardly people use them. And these are basically given for tremors. And amantadine is a odor drug. Actually, it is an antiviral drug. It can also reduce this dyskinesia caused by this levodopa. So that can be used, but hardly people use it. Side effects are libido reticularis and weight gain. So I already taken 1 hour. So I think so I will take, if I continue, it will go for somebody has said yes, sir. So you want me to continue, or shall I take another day? Because already I have taken 1 hour. What do you people say?
Another day, sir.
Okay. I will be solving MCQs then, and also will try to finish off Huntington's chorea. Okay.
So what is levido reticularis?
Levido reticularis is a dermatological problem, madam, actually. Okay. I'll show that picture next time.
Okay, sir.
So if you got any doubts, we'll try to solve here, because just going without solving also is not a good thing. Anybody wants to ask doubts? I want to wait for some time and discuss with you people. If you want to put something in the chat box, it is good. If you want, I'll stop recording. If you're feeling that, okay, hold on, I'll stop recording now.